she kept going, and I started screaming at her. So I left. I walked out the door, went over to the car, opened the door, boom. Cut my fucking head open.
It was June 19th, 2013, and the world was still reeling from the shocking news that James Gandolfini, the man who embodied Tony Soprano for nearly a decade, had suddenly passed away at just 51 years old. The man seemed invincible. He seemed larger than life. He seemed like he could live forever. But mortality doesn't care about fame, doesn't care about how much the world needs you, and doesn't wait for the right moment. What nobody knew at the time was that in the final weeks and months before his death, Gandolfini had been involved in something extraordinary, something quiet, something that revealed who he really was beneath the darkness of the character that defined him. A story about genuine kindness, about second chances, about using your power in the industry to lift people up instead of pushing them down. In a world where Hollywood is famous for chewing people up and spitting them out, where careers are ended with a text message and dreams die in conference rooms, James Gandolfini had chosen a different path. He'd chosen to be a person who remembered what it felt like to struggle, who never forgot where he came from, and who used his influence to help others find their way. If you're new here, welcome to a place where we uncover the real stories behind Hollywood's greatest legends. Stories that reveal the humanity beneath the fame, the kindness beneath the image. If you care about these kinds of narratives that show what it really means to be a good person in an industry that often rewards the opposite, please hit that subscribe button right now. You're going to want to follow along as we bring you more stories like this to understand why this story matters. We have to understand who James Gandolfini was before he became Tony Soprano. He was born on September 18, 1961, in Shrewsbury, New Jersey, the son of a stoneworker father and a school dinner lady mother. His childhood was modest, not poor, but not comfortable either. His father, James S., was a hardworking man who built things with his hands, who believed in the value of honest labor, who didn't talk much about feelings or dreams. His mother, Santa, was warm, nurturing. The emotional heart of the family, young James grew up in a working-class neighborhood where your worth was measured by what you could do, by how much money you made, by whether you could provide for your family. Acting wasn't something people like him did. Movie stars came from California or New York City, not from Jersey. They didn't come from families where your father fixed cars and your mother worked in schools. But James had something his father didn't quite understand: an imagination, a sensitivity, an ability to feel things deeply and express them through his body and his voice. When he was young, acting was something he discovered in school, a way to transform himself into someone else, a way to escape the limitations of his own life for a few hours on stage. His father didn't get it, couldn't relate to it. There was a distance there, a fundamental misunderstanding about what mattered, what was real, what was worth pursuing. But his mother encouraged him, saw something in him that was special, something that shouldn't be squashed or ignored. James went to Rutgers University, one of the few people from his neighborhood who actually went to college. He studied acting, and he was good, really good. He had a presence even then, a quality that made people watch him. But after college came the long haul of trying to make it as an actor. The rejection, the years of small roles, the feeling that maybe his father had been right all along, that this was a foolish dream. He did television work, minor roles in shows that nobody remembers. He was in films that went straight to video. He had parts in productions that lasted a few episodes before being canceled. For nearly 15 years after college, James Gandolfini was a working actor, but not a successful one. He was making decent money, enough to survive, but he wasn't famous. He wasn't the guy people recognized on the street. And there were times when he thought about quitting. Times when he wondered if his father's skepticism had been justified. Times when he looked at himself in the mirror and asked if he was wasting his life chasing an impossible dream. Then The Sopranos came along. A television network was taking a massive risk on a show about a mob boss in therapy. Nobody knew it would become the most groundbreaking show in television history. Nobody knew that this character, Tony Soprano, would redefine what it meant to be a protagonist, what it meant to be human on screen. And nobody knew that James Gandolfini would become the transformational force that made it all possible. His performance wasn't just acting, it was art. It was vulnerability disguised as violence. It was a broken man trying to hold together an empire while his psyche crumbled. It was real. The show premiered in 1999, and within months, James Gandolfini's life changed forever. He went from being a struggling actor to being one of the most respected performers in the industry. He won multiple Emmy Awards. He became a household name. He finally had the validation he'd been searching for his entire career. But success didn't change him the way it changes most people. He didn't become arrogant, didn't develop a God complex, didn't forget what it felt like to be invisible. By 2012, James Gandolfini was 50 years old and at the absolute peak of his career and his life. He'd won every award worth winning. He was respected by directors and actors and critics alike. He had the kind of power in this industry that most people spend their whole lives dreaming about but never achieving. But James remembered something that most successful people forget: what it felt like to not have that power, what it felt like to be rejected, what it felt like to be overlooked. There was a young actor named Michael. Nobody famous, nobody you'd know. He was struggling just like James had struggled, going to auditions, getting rejected. Working occasional bit parts on television shows, Michael had talent, real talent. But he was stuck in that middle place where you're good but not good enough to get noticed, where your agent barely calls, where you start to wonder if you should give up. Michael had a small part in a film production, just a few scenes, nothing major. But James Gandolfini was in that same production, playing the lead, and during the filming, James noticed Michael saw something in him that reminded him of his younger self. One day, between takes, James approached Michael. They talked. James asked about his journey, his struggles, his dreams. And instead of the conversation being about James and his success, it became about Michael and his potential. What Michael didn't know was that James was about to do something that would change his life. James made a phone call to a director he knew, a director he respected and who respected him. James told this director about Michael, described his talent, his dedication, his potential. He used his credibility, his position, his power in the industry to open a door for someone else. That single conversation led to Michael getting an audition for a significant role in a major production. And Michael got that role. It wasn't just a bit part, it was substantial. It was the kind of role that gets you noticed. That starts building momentum that can actually launch a career. But James didn't stop there. Over the following months, he checked in on Michael, asked how he was doing, offered advice when asked, made introductions to other people in the industry, used his name and his reputation to create opportunities for someone he barely knew. Michael's career took off, not overnight, not with the kind of sudden explosion that James had experienced, but gradually, with each good role building on the last. He started getting cast in better and better productions. He started getting recognized, started being called in for meetings, started having agents actually interested in representing him years later. Michael would describe James as the person who believed in him when nobody else did, as the person who used his power not for selfish purposes but for lifting others up. Michael never forgot it, and he made sure that as he continued to rise in the industry, he did the same thing for others. But James wasn't looking for gratitude, wasn't looking for recognition, wasn't doing it to build his image or his legacy. He did it because his mother had taught him something. His father never quite understood that the measure of a man isn't what he accumulates, it's what he contributes. The measure of success isn't how high you climb, it's how many people you help climb alongside you. What made this story even more profound is that James continued doing this throughout his final years. He became known in certain circles, among struggling actors and filmmakers, as someone who actually gave a damn, someone who would take meetings with unknowns, who would read scripts from up-and-coming writers, who would use his name and his credibility to help open doors. He didn't publicize it, didn't talk about it in interviews, didn't use it to improve his public image. It was quiet, it was consistent, and it was genuine. Just weeks before his sudden death in June of 2013, James Gandolfini was still making time for these acts of kindness. He was still taking meetings with struggling artists, still reading scripts, still using his influence to create opportunities for others. A young screenwriter had sent James a script, an unsolicited submission through an agency that James probably never should have looked at. But he did. He read it, and he saw something in it, something raw and honest and necessary. James reached out to the writer, told her that he believed in her work, told her that the script deserved to be made, and then he did something extraordinary. He attached his name to the project as a producer. Not the star, not the lead role, but as a producer. using his credibility to help get the script in front of people who could actually make it happen. That script became a film that premiered at a major film festival, and the young writer's career was forever changed. All because James Gandolfini chose to use his power to lift someone else up. When James died just weeks later in a hotel in Rome, surrounded by family, but taken far too soon, the film industry mourned the actor, the artist, the man who had redefined television, but some people, those struggling artists whose doors he had opened, whose dreams he had validated, whose careers he had touched, mourned something else. They mourned the loss of a man who had actually cared, who had remembered what it felt like to struggle, who had chosen kindness over arrogance. What emerged in the weeks and months after his death were stories. Small stories from people who weren't famous, who didn't have platforms, who weren't well known, but who had been profoundly affected by his generosity. A lighting designer who James had recommended to a director who got that job and never looked back. A production assistant whose script James had read and encouraged when nobody else believed in. A young actor who James had defended during a casting meeting when powerful people were dismissing her talent. These stories didn't make the headlines. They weren't the narratives that the major media outlets focused on, but they were real. They were the legacy of James Gandolfini that meant the most. In the years after his death, James Gandolfini's reputation as an actor and an artist has only grown. Young actors study his performances, aspiring directors analyze his technique. Film schools use clips of his work to teach what it means to be truly present as a performer. But there's another legacy that's less talked about, less celebrated in the mainstream. But perhaps more important, it's the legacy of kindness, of using power responsibly, of remembering where you came from. Several of the young artists whose careers James touched have gone on to tremendous success, and many of them have made it a point to pay it forward, to do what James did for them, to see talent in others, to use their position to help, to remember that they too were once struggling and unknown. There's a quiet legacy of kindness that ripples outward from James Gandolfini, a legacy that says more about who he really was than any award or accolade ever could. His son Michael grew up in the shadow of Tony Soprano, but James made sure that Michael knew his real father. Not the violent mob boss, but the sensitive, caring, thoughtful man who believed in people, who used his platform to help others, who understood that success meant nothing if it wasn't paired with compassion. In a world where Hollywood is often defined by ego, by competition, by people trying to step on others to climb higher, James Gandolfini chose differently. He climbed high, reached the very top of his profession, but instead of pulling the ladder up after him, he left it down. He helped others climb too. That's who Tony Soprano really was, not on screen, where he was violent and broken and tragic, but in real life, where he was kind, generous, and genuinely good. And maybe that's the most important thing we can learn from his life, that your truest self isn't revealed when you're on screen, or in front of cameras, or performing for the world. Your truest self is revealed in the quiet moments, in the choices you make when nobody's watching, in how you treat people who can't do anything for you. James Gandolfini was a brilliant actor who created one of the most iconic characters in television history. But he was an even better human being. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that success is measured by kindness, not accolades. And in the comments, tell us who's someone that helped lift you up when you were struggling.